The Ukrainian armed forces are urgently defending Donbas. Ukrainian defenders have launched a counterattack. Syrskyi has made an urgent statement. -8 enemy units. Ukrainian intelligence has shown shocking footage of the Russian defeat. Nothing like this has happened before. So, what is currently happening on the front line? And what is important to know? Let's go through everything step by step. Greetings to all of Ukraine today. I'm Renata Aslanova, and here are the latest events. It has become known that Ukrainian defenders have carried out successful counterattacks in the Donetsk region and liberated areas from the occupiers. 3 settlements at once. This was reported by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrskyi.
I am working in the areas of active combat. The Pokrovsk direction is where things are the most difficult, where the defense of Ukrainian independence and the Ukrainian flag are not just lofty words, but a daily risk and a daily feat.
During the trip, the Commander-in-Chief awarded the best soldiers for their resilience, bravery, and exemplary fulfillment of their military duty. He noted that our troops successfully counterattacked and cleared the enemy from the villages of Novomykhailivka, Zelenyi and Volodymyrivka in the Donetsk region. Syrskyi expressed his deep gratitude to his fellow soldiers, both men and women, for their actions in these decisive days. At the same time, Syrskyi noted that he worked at the command posts, in the unit stationed at positions carrying out combat missions in the Pokrovsk direction, and listened to reports from the commanders of the corps and brigades regarding the operational situation.
The situation is truly difficult. The enemy has concentrated its main efforts on this section of the front. But we must hold the line. Assistance in organizing combat operations will be provided. The issues regarding additional ammunition, drones, and electronic warfare equipment have been resolved.
Meanwhile, information has emerged about the ambitions of cooperation. A special unit killed and wounded over 800 Russian occupiers during a special operation in the enemy's rear in the Sumy region. This was reported by the press service of the main Intelligence Directorate. The Intelligence Directorate carried out a series of raids and sabotage operations in the rear of the Russian military grouping with the aim of stopping the advance of the enemy in the Sumy direction. The intelligence officers reported that in close combat and with the support of artillery and strike drones, they destroyed at least 334 Russian soldiers and wounded another 550. Thank you. Thanks to these actions, the enemy's advance was stopped and the supply of provisions and ammunition to their group of troops was disrupted. Helicopters were involved in the operation to deploy special forces as well as our own artillery unit, which provided fire cover, in particular with Bodana cannons. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, Ukrainian drones delivered a powerful strike against Russian logistics. A train carrying fuel was blown up of the enemy. The train derailed, after which drones began to finish it off. The situation at the front remains tense as the enemy is trying to advance in all directions along the front line. We will tell you all the details about the situation on the front line, the route of the Russian army, and the new long-range missile of the Ukrainian armed forces further in this video.
In the Zaporizhzhia direction, Ukrainian drones delivered a powerful strike against Russian logistics. Between the occupied areas of Orozhain and Tokmak, a fuel train was blown up. According to Petro Andriushchenko, advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, the train derailed, after which it was finished off with everything that could fly. In effect, the railway connection of the Russian army through the occupied part of Zaporizhzhia region has been paralyzed. The strike was carried out by the UAV battalion Ronins of the 65th Separate Mechanized Brigade. Meanwhile, the situation at the front remains tense According to Deep State, the enemy has advanced in the area of the Serebryansk forestry in Luhansk region and near the settlement of Olhivsky. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, taking advantage of identified weaknesses in the defense. If previously these areas were considered relatively stable, now the enemy is trying to apply pressure. The Pokrovsk direction remains the most difficult. Over the past day, Ukrainian soldiers have repelled 50 assault attacks here, in the areas of Volodymyrivka, Mayak, Novoekonomikhne, Rodinske, Hrodivka, Novukrainka, and other settlements.
The situation remains extremely tense, meaning the enemy has concentrated a very large amount of the resources they have here. First and foremost, the occupiers are trying to use this resource, which is an extremely large number of personnel. In other words, disposable soldiers. These could be... Their occupiers are absolutely differently trained, whether hastily gathered, excuse my language, cannon fodder, mercenaries, criminals, convicts. They're, I don't know, just hastily gathered, well, untrained, unequipped. Yes, unfortunately, there are also among them highly trained, highly skilled special forces units. Moreover, there are quite professional pilots, quite professional artillerymen.
In addition to infantry assaults meant to wear us down, the Russians are actively using various types of UAVs, trying to strike our rear positions up to 30 kilometers deep.
Now, there is no longer such a thing as a front line. There is simply a zone of activity, a zone of contact. And enemy UAVs of various types, FPV drones, some strike wings, they can fly in as far as 5, 10, 15, 20, even 30 kilometers. It varies from case to case. The enemy really does use different tactics, but in some things they succeed, in others they don't. But in most cases, all enemy assault attempts are unsuccessful.
Heavy fighting continues in other directions as well. In the Novomykhailivka and Lyman sectors, there were 61 combat engagements in the past 24 hours. The enemy attacked the areas of Hrushivka, Zeleny Hai, Timirivka, Kameshchevaka, Zelena Dolina, Kolodyazy, Torske, Yampil, and Hrihorivka. Activity remains high in the Turetsky, Kupiansk, southern Slobozansky, and Kyiv sectors, and also in the Dnipro direction. And despite all the difficult situations, an interesting episode took place in the skies over Eleman, China. 2 FPV drones at once were hunting an enemy strike drone. Anti-aircraft gunners from the Steel Lions Brigade and pilots of the 53rd Brigade tried to destroy the Russian Molnia. The target was hit during this pursuit. The past 24 hours have also been among the most intense on the front. The enemy carried out missile and airstrikes. He also carried out artillery shelling and used drones. In turn, our forces are steadfastly holding the defense and delivering retaliatory strikes. Over the past day, our fighters struck 9 areas. These included concentrations of enemy personnel, weapons, and equipment, 2 artillery systems, and 1 important facility belonging to the Russian invaders. Renata is not disclosing the details yet. And they make it clear to the Russians that any attempt at an offensive will be destroyed. Every assault, every drone, and every vehicle, the enemy is under fire.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The pace of Russia's advance, and it really is striking. In 1,010 days of war, the occupying army has captured less than 1% of Ukrainian territory. This is the statistic provided by Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi. This completely refutes the Kremlin's claims about major Russian successes on the front. All the details are in the report.
Armata, the 1073rd day of the Great Russian-Ukrainian War. Almost 3.5 years of daily battles, artillery shelling, drone attacks, and thousands of casualties. But the result, if you look at the battle map, speaks for itself. Moscow, which boasted it would take Kiev in 72 hours. In 110 days of bloody fighting, they captured less, 1% of Ukrainian territory. These are the conclusions reached by deep state analysts.
Starting from November 12, 2022, 108,651 square kilometers were occupied as of that date. As of today, 114,493 square kilometers. The enemy has occupied 5,142 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. This amounts to 0.96% of the total area of the Ukrainian state within its internationally recognized borders.
The Russians did indeed have significant operational successes, but this was in the first weeks of the invasion when Ukraine was simply not ready to face what was once considered the world's second strongest army, which was simultaneously pushing forward on all fronts. At that time, the enemy managed to capture Kherson, Mariupol, and parts of the Kyiv, Chernihiv, and Sumy regions.
Everyone realized that they needed to start digging in immediately. At the very least, after losing the Kharkiv region, the Russian Federation clearly understood this for itself. That you can't hold on to victory on wheels from their side. If you want to secure your position, you have to dig in. And all this digging in, all these positions, they neutralized all the major breakthroughs that happened at the beginning of the war. At first, Russia broke through our defenses very massively, then Ukraine pushed the Russian Federation back, and then everyone switched to more or less positional fighting. They dig in, ravines, forests, tree lines, and that's how the fighting is conducted.
But further counteroffensives by the Ukrainian armed forces pushed the occupiers back by dozens of kilometers, turning the tide of the war. Since November 12, 2022, the front has stabilized. Russia still continues its attempts to advance, but not on such a large scale anymore. The enemy is attacking the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, hoping to bite off somehow a little bit of Ukrainian land. Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Kupiansk, Chasiv Yar, Robotyne. Thousands of attempts to storm the trenches, but progress is minimal. Tons of 300, tons of 500 meters. Hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers have been lost, but the strategic picture has hardly changed. Now the enemy is conducting mostly local offensive actions. Pressure, attrition, destruction of infantry and equipment. However, the Russian dictator is unable to capture significant territories.
Despite these losses, and his losses are constantly increasing, the capture of every kilometer and every position is costing him more and more killed and wounded each time. The statistics bear this out. First, his rate of advance has slowed significantly. Second, the level of losses is extremely high. But still, they are trying to achieve the goals they've set for themselves with such confidence.
They lack resources, they lack strength, they lack opportunities. All those things they boasted about so much before the war have turned out to be a sham. Why has there been a wave of generals being dismissed in the Russian Federation? This is a direct message from the dictator Putin to all the military generals who, for many years, convinced him that our army has no equal, that everything is prepared, everything is great. But as it turned out of this million-strong army, only 170,000 people were actually ready to fight at the very start of the war. That's it. None of the others were ready. There was no proper communication, no equipment, not enough ammunition. None of that was there. Everything had been sold off, everything had been stolen. And now this greatness, this so-called greatness, is just a punitive machine that punishes. The general, for this deception, once again shows that the Russian military machine is, for the most part, just a puff of smoke. Yes, they have people, yes, they have decisive allies like Iran and North Korea, but the Russian Federation itself cannot cope with Ukraine.
Ukraine is already definitely the winner in this war. Even under conditions of shell shortages and the aggressor country's superiority in manpower and aviation, Ukraine's defense remains resilient. And the successes of the Russians are much smaller than what Kremlin propagandists claim. Their soldiers are being wiped out on the front lines by the tens of thousands. Their equipment burns on the battlefields, and entire armies of the aggressor are being destroyed under the blows of the Ukrainian military.
And what do you think about the latest events at the front? Share your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button under the video and stay up to date with the main news. There's more to come.